honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. We'd like to welcome everyone to celebrate 50 years of German development cooperation in Bangladesh and International Women's Day. Thank you all for joining us. Today, we will launch the book, In Search of Justice, Untold Tales of Domestic Violence Survivors. This publication marks 50 years of German development cooperation in Bangladesh and celebrates International Women's Day. Women's economic constraints, lack of knowledge, gaps in the law, and gender stereotypes are prevalent in the society, generally making it difficult for women to seek redress from domestic violence. The COVID crisis and movement restrictions exacerbated these constraints as resources and access to services became even more difficult. The book we were talking, In Search of Justice, Untold Tales of Domestic Violence Survivors, explores the justice-seeking journeys of 12 survivors, of 12 domestic violence survivors during the pandemic. This publication is based on research commissioned by the Rule of Law program implemented by GIZ Bangladesh and was conducted by BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, in short, BIGD. These case studies from informing readers about the complexities of the justice journey, women's coping mechanisms, and agency to tackle societal and institutional barriers, and the role of critical actors supporting their access to justice. The research and publication have been supported by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely grateful to have with us Mr. Anisul Haq, MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs. Thank you for joining us. And His Excellency, Mr. Achim Troster, Ambassador, Federal Republic of Germany to Bangladesh. Thank you for joining us, sir. We are also happy to have with us Mr. Mohammad Ghulam Sarwar, Secretary, Law and Justice Division, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs. Ms. Promita Sengupta, Head of Program, Rule of Law, GIZ. Dr. Imran Mateen, Executive Director, BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, BIGD. Yes. And renowned actor and co-chairman of Asiatic 360, Ms. Sara Zakir. Thank you all for joining us. Respected guests, before we get started, I would like to inform you that today's event will be live streamed through Facebook platform and guests will be joining us virtually through Zoom platform. For the purpose of documentation and reporting, the event will be recorded and photographs will be taken. We thank you in advance for giving your consent and cooperation. In adherence to COVID protocols, we request that masks are kept on and social distancing is maintained throughout the event. I would now, without further ado, like to invite our distinguished guests to take their seats on the stage. May I request Mr. Anisul Haq, MP, Honorable Minister, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs to come up on stage. I'd also like to request His Excellency, Mr. Achim Troster, Ambassador, Federal Republic of Germany to Bangladesh. Mr. Mohammad Ghulam Sarwar, Secretary, Law and Justice Division, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs. Ms. Promita Sengupta, Head of Program, Rule of Law, GIZ Bangladesh. Dr. Imran Mateen, Executive Director, BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, BIGD. And Ms. Sara Zakir, renowned actor and co-chairman of Asiatic 360. Thank you so much once again. Ladies and gentlemen, to begin with today's event, I'd now like to invite Ms. Promita Sengupta, Head of Program, Rule of Law, GIZ Bangladesh, to share her opening remarks. Let's welcome Ms. Promita Sengupta.
Thank you. Honorable Minister, Mr. Anisul Haq, Your Excellency Ambassador Achim Tröster, Honorable Secretary, Mr. Gholam Sarwar, Ms. Sarah Zakir, and Dr. Imran Mateen, friends in government, in partner NGOs, development partners, the BIGD research team, and my colleagues in GIZ. A very warm, literally very warm welcome to you. It gives me great pleasure to open today's event and to celebrate International Women's Day with you and to commemorate 50 years of partnership between Germany and Bangladesh. GIZ's work on combating violence against women in Bangladesh is not new. We have been supporting work on women's empowerment and on their access to justice since 2005. And as many of you present here already know, we have also been involved in support to the drafting of Bangladesh legislation on domestic violence. As vibrant as the women's movement and the support for women's rights has been in this country, new concerns have emerged during almost 2 years of a raging pandemic and the economic and social costs it has brought with it. Measures to stem the spread of the virus have forced women out of jobs and out of financial independence, often forced to return to traditional caregiving roles. The introduction of lockdowns has made them more exposed to situations of domestic violence and abuse, and often trapped them in the isolation of their own homes with their abusers. This phenomenon has come to be known as the shadow pandemic across the world, and Bangladesh faces its own share of this burden. As you have heard, the publication about to be launched today presents a look at the complex justice journeys of 12 such women in Bangladesh and focuses on their coping strategies and agency in tackling the burdens that society and institutions place in front of them. It speaks also of the accessibility of services and the effectiveness of different domestic violence response mechanisms from the perspective of these survivors, and sheds light on the experience of service providers during the pandemic. The book, as you know, is a result of a collaboration between BIGD and GIZ's Rule of Law program, together with BLAST, BRAC, and RDRS as partners. Here, I would like to thank the Ministries of Law, Justice, and Parliamentary Affairs and the Ministry of Home Affairs for their partnership. A very big thanks to the government of Germany for their support to this groundbreaking endeavor. Thanks also to the United Kingdom for their support in this journey. In closing, maybe some questions. In the face of the shocks that justice institutions and justice providers have faced during the pandemic, with courts having to close and prisons filled to the brink, we need to ask ourselves, how will justice services build resilience to global shocks like these in the future? How will those in charge of delivering justice plan in proactive ways to prevent the loss of the gains that they have made in the last years when faced with external crises? How will women know that they are safe and the resources that depend on that they depend on for accessing help and justice are not being diverted for other emergency responses, such as during the pandemic? How will these women access justice if their needs are not accommodated in recovery and rehabilitation plans after the pandemic? Thank you for being here and for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Sengupta, for your thought-provoking words on actions to be taken to support the domestic violence survivors. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'd like to invite Dr. Imran Mateen, Executive Director, BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, BIGT, to address the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Mateen.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank the Honorable Minister, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, the Secretary, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Honorable Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Bangladesh for joining us today. So I wanted to really share, a few thoughts, as a research organization in the context of the research that we have been part of. So I think the first thing that I want to basically share is, I think it's been already mentioned, the silent or the shadow pandemic. And I think this is going to be a long shadow unless there are urgent actions to try and do something about it. So I think this long silent shadow needs an urgent action. I think that's the sort of first very important thing to bear in mind, because the implication of this long cast of this long silent shadow will fall not only within the household, but also will fall within the economy and the social relationships. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the urgency of action in terms of taking action to to sort of do something different about the way we've approached the problem of justice-seeking behavior. And it is in this context, the research that we have been part of in partnership with GIZ Rule of Law Program, but also with partners, research partners who are practicing organizations, I think has been really, really powerful, because this has really allowed us to look at the complex justice journeys, as we basically call them. And I think here lies the most important point. And the point is that the understanding the narrative of this complexity is extremely important to design and develop services. And I think we need to pay attention, much closer attention to these complexities and to the complex narrative, and not a linear way of approaching the problem. And this would require a huge amount of horizontal, vertical collaborations across different levels. And I think that's going to be really important. I think what COVID has really shown us very clearly is that a system is as good as it holds up in terms of crisis. If you have a system that doesn't hold up in terms of crisis, that is no good as a system. And I think we have seen this across different systems that we thought we had in place, be it in terms of relief distribution, be it in terms of justice-seeking behavior, social protection, so on and so forth. We have seen the fissures of the system. And I think now it is incumbent on us, as we think about building forward better, how do we learn from the fissures of the system and take urgent action to try and build forward better? And I think this is going to be really, really important. The other very important point that I really want to raise that emerges from the research that we have done is the importance of looking at the social impact of a crisis, not only the economic impact, because I think the economic and the social are extremely interlinked. And we see this in this particular context. If we are not serious about the social implications, such as gender-based violence that happens during this type of crisis, we're not going to be also making progress in the economic dimension in terms of labor force participation and economic efficiency. So I think these are extremely interlinked, and we need to really pay much closer attention to the interlinkage of these different types of impacts. Finally, I hope that this work that we have done, which is based on pretty serious, solid research. I mean, we have articulated the case studies in a very communicable way, but what underpins these case studies is very rigorous, serious research. And I hope that these case studies will not only be kind of pretty booklets that are sort of shoved away, but actually we find ways to read them, to use them as tools of reflection for practitioners, for policymakers, to really understand the reality, but also ask ourselves questions in terms of how things could have been done differently to have a different ending to these stories. And I think that would be the most important impact of this research work that we have done. I would like to thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nating, for setting the context of the research and for your insights on the social impacts and along with the COVID crisis. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to request renowned actor and co-chairman of Asiatic 360, Ms. Ara Saker, to deliver a monologue based on one of the case studies from the book. Let's take it.
My name is Meeta. Yes, that is my name. An ordinary girl with an ordinary name. I moved to Dhaka for work when I was 15. I was aware that there would be challenges, but how ready was I? I was only 15. I found work in a garment factory and started living with a friend. After each day of work, I dropped into my bed, dead tired, day in and day out. It was the same routine, day in and day out. When I walked to and from the factory with the other garment girls, I started noticing a pair of eyes following me. A pair of eyes stalked me at work, in the bazaar, everywhere. His name was Momin. He sold fish in the bazaar, a fishwala. The entire community seemed to know that Momin was keen on me and that he followed me around. When others wanted to know why he was always around me, he would lie, saying that he was married to me, that we were married. I should have understood then that he was not a good person. Instead, the 15-year-old in me thought this fellow loved me madly. The constant attention ended up with me getting married to Moomin. I was in a trance for the first 3 years. Everything seemed perfect, like a dream. I was married, I was earning money, I was saving. Our only conflict was that he would not let me contact my family. He even hit me. Strangely, I did not give much thought to why he was so obsessed with keeping me away from my family. Secretly, I kept in touch with them. One day I heard my brother was gravely ill. My brother, who was my buddy, was dying. I lost my mind. I could not concentrate on work. I had to go home. Momin tried to stop me, but still I went. However, before I reached, my brother had already passed away. I stayed back with my parents for some time, supporting them emotionally through the grief. That is when I came to know that Momin was from a village nearby. That is when I came to know that I was Momin's second wife. It broke my heart. I felt ashamed. I felt humiliated. When I got back to Dhaka, I moved in with a friend without informing Momin. But Momin found me and gradually convinced me to move back with him. Though I went back with him, this time, the love story was totally erased. The incidents of physical and mental torture, which I had ignored earlier, kept haunting me. One day, Momin started talking about doing a new business. He asked me to withdraw all my savings and invest in this new business. I agreed. Soon I found that with my money, Momin built his first wife a new house. By then I was 3 months pregnant. A new life was inside me. At that time, one day, Momin again came and said he would leave me for Shagur Dighi, this time for business. He said, in this COVID times, business in Dhaka, where we lived, was not good. For some odd reason, when leaving, he took away the marriage certificate from the trunk. I couldn't understand why. Momin disappeared. He went completely off the radar, not knowing what else to do. And despite being pregnant, I followed him to Shagur Dighi Khatai. After days, I found him. But clearly, he was avoiding me. He was a fugitive, always on the run. I still waited for him and tried for some kind of a compromise. A common friend mediated and put me in touch with Momin's father and mother. A shalish was arranged. The mediator's decision was that Momin would provide for both the families, the first and the second wife. I would have to live with the reality that I was sharing my husband with another woman. Things were okay for a few days. Again, Momin stopped communicating with me. He told the mediator he did not want to live with me anymore, that it was impossible for him to provide for two families. At that time, I wasn't earning either. The representative gave the verdict that it was best for me to stay with my parents in this situation. Initially, I didn't accept it, but then I realized that if I stayed with my parents, my unborn child, soon to be born, would be cared for. And Momin would also visit us, maybe provide for the child. But again, Momin stopped communicating. I informed the local representative. This time, the representative got irritated and asked me to do whatever I wanted to do. He couldn't reason with Momin anymore. My son was born. Momin came for a few minutes in the dark of night, saw the child, and left. He broke into our home in Dhaka and robbed me of everything. Without finding a way, I asked my father for help. My father shared my story with the BRAC sirs. With their negotiations, Momin sent me a divorce notice. I claimed for a compensation of 1,10,700 takas. Later, the representative and the influential people of the community decided that Momin would give me 70,000 takas. Additionally, he would give me the child support of taka 3,000. A few months after the divorce, Momin stopped providing for the child support, stopped communicating. It seemed Mita or the child never existed. But I am Mita. I am a fighter. I'm determined. I'm determined to win in the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that inspiring performance. And I was just listening to the story and I felt like maybe these are the stories we just read in books, but these are happening in reality. It's really difficult to take in, but yes, it's time for us to fight back. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2009, under a project with the Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, GIZ had commissioned Asiatic for the production of a short public service announcement highlighting the prevalence of domestic violence. More than a decade later, domestic violence still remains pervasive and the PSA remains relevant. We'll now watch that PSA titled Haath, meaning hand. Let's take a look at the PSA.
হৃদয়ে দিয়েছ দোলা রঙেতে রাঙিয়া রাঙাইলে ইতবহরি খেলা তুমি যে ফাগুন রঙের আগুন তুমি যে রসের ধারা তোমার মাধুরী তোমার মদিরা করে মোরে দিশাহারা আমার পরাণে প্রেমের বিন্দু তুমি শুধু
আরে তাতে কি হয়েছে?
আজ দেশের ৪৭% নারী নিজের ঘরে নির্যাতনের শিকার, কাল আরো বাড়বে। তাতে কি হয়েছে আপনিই বলুন।
Thank you, Asiatic, for producing such an important PSA. And I think as many times we watch it, we feel like we still have to fight back a lot. Ladies and gentlemen, I think today is such an important day, and we have chosen this day for unveiling this book. It's really fantastic decision, I'll say. And now it comes to that moment we have all been waiting for, unveiling of the book, In Search of Justice, Untold Tales of Domestic Violence Survivors. While we take a few minutes to set the stage, I would like to draw attention of my team members and to do whatever we have to. And in the meantime, I'll request our honored guests to come to one side so that we can do the setup for the unveiling of the book. Thank you. Now I'd like to call upon Honorable Minister Anisul Haq, MP, and His Excellency Ambassador, Mr. Hakim Toaster, to unveil the book. If you please take your positions on both sides of the book. I'd like to request all the guests on the stage to accompany our distinguished guests as well. So ladies and gentlemen, the book is in front of you, In Search of Justice, Untold Tales of Domestic Violence Survivors. Let's put our hands together, and we hope the objective with which the book has been presented in front of you will become successful in that. We'll just give a moment to our photographers. If they're happy with capturing this moment, I'll request our distinguished guests to take their seats. Okay, thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as you have also been provided with this book, I would like to request you all to hold it in front of you so that we can capture this moment as well with you. I'll just give a moment for everyone to unwrap the book. Our photographer is in front of you. Can you please just raise it on top a little bit? I hope everybody got the book. If not, please, can you hand over the books to our guests? You can take your seats and just hold it on top a little bit. And just give a moment to our photographer, please. So ladies and gentlemen, here we have In Search of Justice, Untold Tales of Domestic Violence Survivors. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to request His Excellency, Mr. Hakim Toaster, Ambassador, Federal Republic of Germany to Bangladesh, to come to the podium and address the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, Ambassador.
Honorable Minister, dear Mr. Saba, Secretary of Law and Justice Division, dear Mrs. Sengupta, dear Dr. Martin, dear Mr. Saka, dear representatives of the state institutions and of several NGOs, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to extend a very good afternoon to all of you. I feel very honored to have the opportunity to speak to you today and to have been invited. So first of all, a very big thank you to those who organized this event, this important event, and to invite me. Well, like a lot of other countries, also Germany 50 years ago was among the first to recognize the independence of Bangladesh. And since then, we have carried out very successful and excellent, frankly, diplomatic relations. But this was not only limited to excellent diplomatic relations, we had established also a very successful development cooperation over the last 50 years. And I'm very thankful to be here at an event that is one important in the chain of events that celebrate this successful cooperation between the People's Republic of Bangladesh and the Federal Republic of Germany. So thank you once again for this excellent opportunity. Well, perhaps most of you know that we are one of the biggest trade partners of Bangladesh. And a lot of you know about German products, high quality and so on, but there's so much more than just trade cooperation between our countries. We also, within the realms of our development cooperation, are highly committed to supporting Bangladesh in the area of good governance. And one of these areas and sectors of good governance is our very close and successful cooperation in the law sector. And this project that has organized this event is one of the prominent features and activities of this law sector, of this very close cooperation in the law sector. And let me use this opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister as a representative of the government very heartily for the extremely successful cooperation between both of our countries and our governments over the last 50 years in so many sectors, but today mainly also in the sector of law cooperation. I'm looking forward to a very close continuation of this cooperation. I would not limit us to the next 50 years. Perhaps the cooperation might be that successful that in several years you will come to Germany and teach us, because it's not necessarily only one way around. So thank you very much. I'm also very happy to be here today in Bangladesh, where women in the past have gotten a growing importance and at least with regard to the political efforts, have gotten an ever more important place in society. But a lot of research work and also the very important book that we are launching today have also clearly shown that there is very often, because we're all humans and this is the existing world, that there's very often a rift between our wishes and our declarations and the reality. That means as good as the legal provisions for the protection of women in this case may be, but there is always somebody who has to implement it, and these are always a human being with all their deficiencies, and so there's always a lot of space that we can still fill to implement what we in principle intend to do. You know that Germany was among the first to give women a prominent role also in political life. More than 110 years ago, we celebrated for the first time International Women's Day that we have the honor to celebrate today. And I may, at this occasion, especially welcome some of my co-males here who have taken all their courage to show up I think together we will make it. Thank you very much for coming and to giving a clear sign that the role of the women in societies is primordial, and we all at our different places where we stay have a lot still to do. Well, mainly in Bangladesh over the last decades, women have entered the labor markets. A lot of women have gotten a place in society, in the economy, apart from their traditional roles in the household. A lot of young ladies, girls had access to school. Not yet all. There's still some efforts to be done, but a lot has been achieved in this area. But external shocks can never be avoided. We have now the book launch against the background of the COVID crisis, but looking at the news that we hear on TV and watch on TV, I fear that the COVID crisis is not the only crisis that we are facing today. You might all have seen that the tragic events in the tragic war in Ukraine will affect the whole world and also Bangladesh. This will have economic repercussions also on Bangladesh. And I honestly fear that those who have so proudly taken the first steps to get a role in society, that means younger women, I'm thinking mainly of those in the garment industry, will be those who are affected most from a downturn in the economy that will also affect Bangladesh. So I fear even after COVID, there's a lot to do for us to promote the role of women and to protect women and younger girls. Well, what is this book for? I think it is mainly not for those who are telling these gripping, very impressive and also heartbreaking stories, because this book is about mainly about those who are the less privileged ones and those who are oppressed and who suffer from the real conditions that we still have. I think this book is more for people like us who are not directly affected, who are privileged, not to live under the conditions the poor 12 ladies who tell their heartbreaking stories are suffering from. But I think that this book is an extremely good tool for all those who are working in the sector. And I think there's a moral obligation for us all to combat these atrocities committed to women, for this taking of all perspective and for all this suffering. I think every human being who has, apart from legal obligations that we all know too well, every human being that has a heart has to feel obliged to help to implement all these criteria and issues. So I think it's very good for people like us to get really a good insight. And believe it or not, I've looked into the book. Thank you very much for sending it to me. I found it extremely well done, extremely impressive, and also heartbreaking. But apart from the fact that it personally moved me very much, and I'm quite sure that it will move you also if you dare to take a look at it, which I will very much encourage you to do. It is also, in my point of view, a very useful tool because every chapter is accompanied by legal comments. It's not about just hearing a story. It's not sort of documentary fiction, but it's an excellent tool and accompanied by a very close relationship to the legal system, because the book is not only about the tragic fate of these very strong women who try to struggle to survive, because in the end we're talking about survivors. That also means implicitly there are some women, ladies, young girls who are not survivors. They cannot speak up. So we also have to think about them. And it's about their efforts to get help and to find support in the society they're living in. I've learned that they are mainly trying to get support and help from their families, and I think that is quite normal. And among their relatives, But that also leads me to thinking that it's not only the whole phenomenon, it's not only related to legal systems and to legal provisions and to technocratic technical aspects. Dr. Martin has thankfully mentioned that there is a wide socio-cultural aspect in that. If I'd be malicious, what I would never be, I would say it's about a brainwashing project. It's about changing mentalities. It's not just about technical issues. The technical issues can only just be an instrument for something we would like to do, to put in place after we have changed our mentalities in mind. Because the situations in which the 12 girls have found themselves in that are so impressively described and laid down in this book, they are an emanation of the relation of the situation, of the socio-cultural situation in the country, and of what are our ideas of a society and the roles also women have to play in it. So I think, first of all, the first effort has to begin, as I would say, between the ears in our minds. And I'm absolutely aware that this is a long haul. That takes really a lot of patience. And I don't think that in order to overcome all these phenomena that are described in the book, we will be ready in 10 years. And allow me also to say, I was talking about brainwashing and change of mentality. It also, let me say, appeals us to think about also some outdated, in the light of the equal rights that everybody and also women have to play, outdated concepts of living, of society and living together. And I'm absolutely convinced that also religious consideration that, in my point of view, derive out of a outdated, non-adapted, and excuse me, also sometimes misled interpretation of religious prescription may lead to a situation that I think nobody can accept. And we have very clear examples in the book. I'm talking about the situation of divorced women, the socio-cultural implication that has. I've not being an expert, but I have my doubts if these are really regulations that cannot be changed by a society of goodwill, where everybody should enjoy its equal rights. So to conclude this, thank you very much for all those who contributed to this event and to launching this book, who made this book possible. I may very convincedly encourage you all to have a close look at the book, but mainly also I wish that the book will have a very wide distribution. I think it should serve in the educational system. I think everybody who is a universitarian, who is a student here, should know about the situation of those who are the less privileged in the country, and this affects everybody. And in this sense, I wish the book a very good distribution and a lot of success. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for sharing your valuable thoughts and your words of support. And after the speech, we have to mention that this year's Women's Day's theme is gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. So it is high time that we take care of it today so that we can get a sustainable tomorrow for all the genders, where it's not only for one day we celebrate the Women's Day, it will be every day. And when we say equal rights, it doesn't mean it has to be more rights. It just, we want the equal rights for all those women out there. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would now like to request Honorable Minister, Mr. Anisul Haq MP, Minister of Law, Justice and Parliamentary, to deliver his valuable speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Minister.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good morning. Your Excellency, Ambassador of Federal Republic of Germany, Mr. Achim Strosser, Secretary, Law and Justice Division, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, Mr. Mohammad Ghulam Sarwar, Head of Program, Rule of Law, GIZ, Ms. Promita Shingupta, Executive Director, BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, Mr. Imran Mateen, Co-Chairperson of Asiatic 360, Ms. Sarah Zakir, distinguished guests, and from different ministries and institutions of the government, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here at the launching of the book, In Search of Justice, Untold Tales of Domestic Violence Survivors. On International Women's Day and to commemorate the anniversary of development cooperation between Bangladesh and Germany. 2022 is a special year as we celebrate the 50 years of friendship and partnership between Bangladesh and Germany. Germany was one of the first countries to recognize Bangladesh as an independent country. In the immediate aftermath of the Liberation War, it was extremely important for Bangladesh, a country devastated by war, to establish diplomatic relations with powerful countries like Germany. Subsequently, such diplomatic ties helped pave the way for growth and stability for the new country. Since 1972, Germany has stood by Bangladesh as a major partner, as our second largest export market, and by providing technical assistance in priority sectors such as governance, climate, and energy, and others. For this, we thank the Federal Republic of Germany. I cannot think of a better way to celebrate the International Women's Day than to launch a book that tells us about the justice journey of survivors of domestic violence. The rendering of the excerpts from the book really brought tears in my eyes. Domestic violence and violence against women are matters that the government of Bangladesh is deeply concerned about and is committed to protect, prevent, and reduce. It is fundamentally important to understand the state of social and legal protection for those who are subjected to violence at home by their nearest ones, especially under the pandemic conditions. These case studies tell us the story of support from family and communities, from semi-formal, informal, and formal justice institutions, from law enforcement agencies and other institutions. Survivors' demand for justice is relentless as they go from person to person, from one institution to another. The case studies do not tell a pretty tale, for it informs us how we have failed them despite all our efforts. At the same time, the case study tells us how important it is to have supportive legal frameworks and support services and mechanisms at different levels for survivors to find the support they need. For example, the government has promulgated a number of laws to protect and prevent violence against women, such as the Women and Children Prevention Act 2000 and the Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Act 2010. It has instituted establishments and services such as the one-stop crisis centers, victim support centers, National Helpline Center for Violence Against Women and Children, and is implementing comprehensive national action plan to prevent violence against women and children 2013 to 2025. These case studies also help better understand the role of institutions and where interventions are needed. In the 8th five-year plan, the government has clearly stated that it will invest in better understanding the barriers to justice for women and children. As part of removing barriers to justice for women and children, the government is committed to improving the effectiveness of informal justice sector for disputes to be resolved at the community level. For as seen from the case studies, community is the first port of call when seeking justice. This will also assist in reducing inflow of new cases into the already overburdened formal justice system. The National Justice Audit data has shown that a two-pronged strategy is needed to reduce the massive case backlog, which creates barriers to accessing justice, especially for women and children. This will be done by reviewing all pending cases and consistently filtering of new cases. This two-pronged strategy will have an impact in reducing some of the barriers that women and children face in accessing justice, for the justice audit has highlighted the inordinate length of time taken to resolve cases in the Nari or Shishu courts. Looking ahead, it is important to find ways to support women and girls, especially those at risk to domestic violence and gender-based violence, to recover from the constraints created by the pandemic. First of all, it is essential for justice services to remain available at all times under any circumstances for survivors of violence to seek redressal. We must be careful not to redirect resources, especially during lockdowns and movement restrictions, in a manner that further restricts access to justice and essential services. For example, availability of law enforcement services, health services, and other public services must remain open and within the reach of women and girls during this pandemic. They need to know where to go for help, and therefore, greater awareness of helplines and services are also essential. Economic hardship imposed by the pandemic has been severe, and we know that this has exacerbated the violence women have faced. So finding work opportunities and training is urgently needed for re-entry into the job market. For adolescents who started working, both paid and unpaid, to support their families during the pandemic, have to be brought back into the education system. Otherwise, we will see the lifelong negative impact of the pandemic on their lives, with early marriages for girls as being one of them. I truly believe that we must collectively focus our attention and work in partnership with civil society organizations on investing in strengthening the capabilities of women and adolescents so that they have greater voice and agency in determining the outcome of their lives. It is time not only for legal reforms, but also for a change in the mindset. I thank the German government for their long-term support and technical assistance to Bangladesh. I also thank GIZ's Rule of Program and the BRAC Institute of Development Studies for the production of the case studies, which I believe is a unique publication. And on that note, I wish everyone a happy International Women's Day. Joy Bangla, Joy Bangabandhu, Bangladesh Chirojibi Hok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for your forward-looking speech and that inspiring words. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's program. We are grateful to His Excellency, Mr. Achim Troster, for your time, our Honorable Ambassador, Federal Republic of Germany to Bangladesh, and thanks to our Honorable Minister, Mr. Anisul Haq MP, Ministry of Law, Justice and Parliamentary, for joining us today and taking out time from your busy schedule. Thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd also like to thank you all. Your presence made today's launching a success. So thank you for your time. This ends our program. We wish everyone a happy Women's Day. And yes, indeed, hope the rest of the day will go well. Take care. Thank you very much.